When it comes to NASCAR games, I'm a bit retro to say the least. I have a lot of old school NASCAR games, and that's typically what I play. I just haven't been impressed with a lot of games that have come out in the last few years, especially that NASCAR 21 Ignition looked like an absolute abomination. But since I found out that iRacing will take over the NASCAR license, I've been very optimistic, very excited. Recently, I did pick up NASCAR 5 Heat on the Nintendo Switch, and that's the most recent NASCAR game I've bought, and it was on sale for a pretty deep discount. Prior to that, the most recent NASCAR game I had played was NASCAR Inside Line, which is basically NASCAR 2013, so it has like the 2012 roster. I have a huge love and passion for old school NASCAR games, especially like NASCAR Dirt to Daytona, or NASCAR 2005, or even Thunder 04. Thunder 04, man, had such a deep career mode, and 05 was so great, honestly. It just felt like, you could play, it was so cool that you could play as all three series, and NASCAR Dirt to Daytona is kind of similar, but it's from a rival brand, of course. So a while back, of course, it was announced that iRacing would be taking over the NASCAR license, and they're going to make their own NASCAR games, and a lot of people are excited, and a lot of people are optimistic. But recently, it was also announced that the Monster games that were created, the Ignition series, oh goodness, the NASCAR Heat series, the NASCAR Arcade Rush, NASCAR Rivals, all those games will be delisted at the end of the year in 2024 on December 31st. And all the DLC as well will be delisted. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I guess this isn't a big deal because a lot of those games have received physical copies. But you have to wonder, will the physical copies go up in price? And that's hard to say. It's hard to say how many people are genuinely interested in NASCAR games. Because, like I said before, NASCAR games have kind of, went downhill over the years. NASCAR Heat 5, obviously a lot of people really like that, and that's one of the favorites from this monster era of NASCAR games. Technics owned it before, and they had the NASCAR The Game 2011, and NASCAR Inside Line, and then there was like NASCAR 14 and 15, I want to say. I never bought 14 or 15. NASCAR Inside Line kind of was my last foray into NASCAR console games until, again, I bought the Switch version recently of NASCAR Heat 5. Yeah, it's just NASCAR games haven't been what they used to be. So it's no surprise, of course, because some of these games, again, have had issues that the DLC and the games will be delisted. But it made me think about gaming preservation. Gaming preservation is something I've talked on this channel before, and I've talked about GOG, Good Old Games. Could GOG play a role in gaming preservation? I mean, could NASCAR work out a deal with GOG? I mean, it's unlikely, but it would be really cool because the thing I like about GOG is when you buy a game, it's actually yours. When you buy that digital game, you can make as many copies as you want, play it anywhere you want without any online connectivity. I think that would be absolutely huge. At the end of the day, though, a lot of people might be asking themselves, what's the big deal about these NASCAR games being delisted? After all, iRacing is taking over and now they have the license. So there's no point in continuing those games. So the license is expired, hence why those games are being delisted. The problem I find with this is the impact it has on future generations. The only way to play these games will be through physical media and dubious means or unofficial ways, on the internet. Those will be the ways. And I think that's unfortunate because I think NASCAR games are not just a sports game, but a racing game. And not only that, they are a time capsule. They show all the old drivers. Not all the old drivers. A lot of drivers get left out. For example, Carl Edwards was missing from a couple EA NASCAR games because of a licensing deal he had done with another company for this other game. And it's a terrible, terrible game. It just looks awful. So yeah, I think it would be great if GOG and NASCAR could team up. That would be awesome. It's really unlikely. But I think GOG could play an important role in preserving these NASCAR games. The problem is licensing. There's so many things in NASCAR games that are licensed. For example, the sponsors. There's sponsors that don't exist anymore, and there's sponsors that are still not in the sport anymore and might not want to see their logos on a video game when they're no longer an active sponsor, and they would maybe want some compensation, so that could present a huge problem. Plus, soundtracks. NASCAR's EA games have some absolute banger soundtracks. Have you ever listened to the soundtrack from Thunder 04? Holy cow, there are so many freaking gems on here. It's just unbelievable. Now, if they were to put some of the EA NASCAR games, yeah, and then dealing with EA, I'm sure would be a problem. The thing about it is, you'd have to remove logos. You would have to remove the soundtracks, but you could also play your own soundtracks, who cares? I remember the cool part about original Xbox was you could actually burn your own songs to your original Xbox and you could play your own soundtracks playing these old NASCAR games, which was pretty darn cool. So there's a lot of NASCAR games, especially later ones, that pose a serious problem as far as gaming preservation goes because there's just too many licenses, too many issues. But I also think some of the old PC NASCAR games, it'd be great if they were preserved. Such as, for example, NASCAR Racing 1999 edition. This had the Truck Series, the Grand National Series, which was called the Busch Series back then, and the Cup Series, of course. It was so neat looking at some of this game. And here's the thing about this game. If I use my DVD disc drive, my portable one I just plug into my computer, I try to put this in, it's not going to play. Honestly, I've tried. Now, there are some unofficial means, like I said, you could play these games, but what about the old NASCAR games? What about the really old NASCAR games, such as something from like 1999? Would it be possible to get those games? And I think about also a recent example is back in 2020, there was the Days of Thunder game. There was a Days of Thunder game that had never actually seen the light of day because a different Days of Thunder game came out on the NES back in the 1980s. And there was a NASCAR game that was basically, it was a prototype. It was pretty much completed. And the folks over at the Video Game History Foundation, got all the stuff together and got it completed and put it on a physical cartridge and actually sold this cartridge. And the money and proceeds went to support the family of this creator. I think they had to get the Days of Thunder rights owners and NASCAR involved or something. I don't know how that it worked exactly, but they got it done. And this was a great thing. And there's no official way you can buy that game anymore. So it would be great if a store like GOG, for example, could be the place you could buy that. I think that'd be cool because the only way right now is if you know somebody who has the cartridge and you have them dump the ROM. And I think maybe maybe they sent some of the files or something. There's a way you can get the files, but you have to put it together yourself or something. It's very confusing. It's not easy. It's not convenient whatsoever. So I think that would be great if somebody like GOG, for example, could get the rights to the Days of Thunder game that came out in 2020. That would be a way of, continuing to preserve these NASCAR games in NASCAR history. I think iRacing producing the next NASCAR game is a very good thing. And they still have some hurdles of their own because of stuff that's happening in real world NASCAR. For example, the fact that 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports are suing NASCAR right now is going to make that game very complicated when it comes out in 2025. Because one of the issues that 2311 and Front Row Motorsports have is the fact that NASCAR is using their likeness and using their stuff to promote the sport or whatever. For example, Bubba Wallace obviously is in a lot of promos. Now, there is a section of the population of NASCAR fans who would love nothing more than to stop seeing Bubba Wallace in promos. But at the same time, would they want to see Bubba Wallace not in the game? Would they want to see Bubba Wallace not in the game? Because, we all have that driver we love to wreck when we race in NASCAR. For example, when I play NASCAR Dirt to Daytona, I love to wreck Rick Crawford. If you don't know who Rick Crawford is, look on YouTube, search for Rick Crawford video. I don't want to get into it because I don't want this to be a video about Rick Crawford. This is a video about NASCAR and gaming preservation. And yeah, so Bubba Wallace would not be in, Tyler Reddick would not be in, Todd Gilliland would not be in. Riley Herbst probably won't be in it. Who else? Zane Smith possibly, because Zane Smith might be in the third front row car. Noah Gragson will be in a front row car. So a lot of drivers might be very well missing from this game. Now, a lot of people might argue, well, they could add them later on as an update if NASCAR and Front Row and 2311 figure this lawsuit out. They could. But would that be available on a physical version of the game? It probably would not. And those drivers could be lost to time if they are not put in the game in time for the release. And I think that's an incredibly bad deal there. And there's a lot of instances, though, back in the day where NASCAR drivers did not appear in the game. I think there were some instances where Jeremy Mayfield didn't appear in the game. And then, of course, NASCAR 2005, Chase for the Cup, I think it was. Yeah. There was Travis Kvapil driving for Bang Racing, the number 28 Ford. That car driver combination never actually existed. Travis Kvapil drove for Bang Racing in the Truck Series for a Toyota team, Now, Bang Racing was going to start a cup team, and Larry McReynolds was part owner of that, and he's always synonymous with Davey Allison in the number 28. So the idea was, I think, that Ward Burton was going to come over to the 28 and bring his Net Zero sponsorship, and they were going to have Dodge as the manufacturer, but that didn't happen. And Ward Burton, and I don't know what Ward Burton did, if he stayed with Haas, I can't remember. But Haas ended up retaining the Net Zero sponsorship, and I think they had Jack Sprague as the driver for a while. But yeah, it's very complicated. So there's this car that doesn't exist, and ironically, Travis Kvapil would go on to drive the 28 Ford for Yates Racing, actually, with as a teammate to David Gilliland, who of course drove the 38 freecreditreport.com back in 2008. I love that paint scheme. Yates Racing Free Credit Report paint scheme, but the car is ugly as sin. The car of tomorrow I thought was ugly as sin. I thought it's one of the best paint schemes on one of the ugliest cars imaginable. But here nor there, I'm getting lost. I'm getting sidetracked here. I would love to see iRacing think more about the future of how they want to preserve their games. And I know companies are notorious for being the worst at preserving their own games. That's just a fact. There are so many things that have just been totally lost to time. I think about, NASCAR 09, which was the last EA Sports NASCAR game. There was a Montreal track that was DLC. Of course, there's no way you can get it anymore. You can't buy that DLC anymore, obviously, because EA no longer owns the license to it. I'm sure there's ways you can get it through dubious means, but there's no official way. I know there's always going to be people who say, just get on the internet, just emulate, just pirate and stuff. Totally understandable. I get where they're coming from. But at the same time, at the end of the day, I think it's important to recognize a lot of people don't want to mess with that stuff. A lot of people just don't care to go to all that trouble. They just want a place where they can easily, conveniently buy it. And that's what I love about GOG. There's so many old PC games that you can just buy. And you don't have to worry about whether they'll work with your computer or not. Like I was talking about with my NASCAR 1999 edition game on PC. That won't work on my PC from this year or whatever that has Windows 11. It would work fine with a computer that's Windows 98, but it will not work with my modern computer. Not through, just putting the disc in and just playing. And I think a lot of people desire that. A lot of people desire this, having easy, convenient ways to play video games. And like I said, NASCAR is not just a sports game. It's not just a racing game either. It's a window in time. There's so many cool drivers. I pop in a NASCAR game on PS2 and there's these cool drivers I totally forgot even existed. You forget about guys like Ashton Lewis Jr., who drove his own independent team, driving the number 46. He drove, sometimes it was white sponsor here, and then he later on went to go drive the 25 car for Renzi Racing. And I think they had U.S. Marine Corps sponsorship, stuff like that. People forget these things. And that's what I like about NASCAR games, is it actually is what helps connect fans to NASCAR itself. There's a lot of YouTubers like Eric from Out of the Groove. He talked about how NASCAR games, playing those NASCAR games actually is what connected him to the sport. Now he's gone on to have a very successful NASCAR channel. Now this isn't a NASCAR channel, this is a video game channel, obviously, but I do like to dabble in NASCAR, and I'm a retro gamer, so I care about the future of NASCAR games, and I care about the future of what they look like and what they're gonna look like to us, because like I said, I love retro games, and these are a time capsule. They literally are a time capsule. Now, they're not a perfect time capsule, like I said, because there's drivers who get left out of the games, unfortunately, and that's just part of the licensing issues. But I would like to see some NASCAR games get preserved. I think this is a topic that nobody's talking about, so I wanted to be the guy to talk about it. So anyways, what are your guys' thoughts? How do you feel about sports games? Should sports games be preserved? Should NASCAR games be preserved? What are some racing games you think should be preserved and should not be lost to time? Comment below. Love to hear what you have to say. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome in this universe. Later.